Is there
Yeah.
a notification?
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. All right, then we can start the show now. Let me check something on my screen. All right, so good morning, dear listeners, and welcome to the third episode of Global Horizons podcast. And we are thrilled to be your host today. We have three hosts this morning as we delve into a world of insightful conversations with thought leaders, researchers, educators, artists around the world who are shaping the landscapes of education, art, and social research. So I'm Lala Bumelasudimantara, Emma Dewi, and Rivaldo, and we have an extraordinary guest with us on this episode. Imagine a place where the ancient landscapes of the Australian outback meet the cutting-edge frontiers of interdisciplinary art and social inquiry. Our guest today, a very good friend of mine, Dr. Emma Alskuber. Good morning, Emma.
Good morning.
Resides in the vibrant heart of, how do you call the place? Mpantwe? Mpantwe, also known as Alice Springs, a town that thrives at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. So Dr. Emma Skuberg is more than an educator for me because she is a visionary bridging the gaps between human and non-human, tradition and innovation, all while championing a decolonized future that celebrates emerging possibilities with a background steeped in interdisciplinary art and a keen eye for social research. Her work takes us beyond the ordinary into the extraordinary. In her research PhD journey, Dr. Skuberg embarked on a remarkable exploration of performative ethnography, weaving narratives that illuminate the intricate relationships between humans and the digital age. Through her lens, we witness the stories of multi-species understanding and collaboration, even in the face of rapid technological shifts. But her work doesn't stop at theories and concepts. It's grounded in real-life contexts. Dr. Skuberg's current focus delves into co-creating shared experiential and multimodal learning experiences with communities of the indigenous people, First Nations people. And these efforts resonate deeply in the world marked by disparities in local economies, health, housing, and the quest for holistic education that places well-being at its core. So we would like you guys to fasten your seatbelts as we embark on the journey of discovery with Emma today. So from the dusty trails of Alice Springs to the forefront of co-creating emerging futures, we will explore the transformative power of education, art, community in today's rapidly evolving world. So good morning, Emma, and then I hope you are well. We will probably talk in 45 minutes or 40 minutes, okay? We are very excited to have you here in our third episode. So Emma, tell me a little bit about Alice Springs and why do you decide to go there? Because I know that you were born in Sydney, right? And grew up in Sydney. And we met in CDU in Darwin in 2018. And then now you are in Alice, at the heart of Australia, Emma.
Yes, thank you so much, and wonderful to be here with everyone this morning.
Thank you, Emma.
For inviting me. I'm very honoured to be invited and to see you, my good friend again, Lala, and
Okay. Thank you.
and to meet other people here on this podcast.
Okay.
Yes, you're right. Growing up in Sydney and then the journey or the curiosities, I suppose, that lead us on in life to explore. I mean, a lot of Australians haven't ever been to the centre of Australia. My parents, who are in their late 70s, had never been here. It's so remote and it's not really on the way to anything. So, you really kind of go out of your way to be here, but it is like a different country in a lot of ways. I think it's a bastion of the amazing ancient knowledge and civilization that has existed here for tens of thousands of years now. So you come here and you're right, it's this kind of collision of amazing possibilities and the kind of the past and the present mingle into this really intriguing moment. And the sense of time here is something that I think as as a researcher and as someone who, I guess, I just want to posture myself to listen.
Right. So you have been in Alice for 3 years or 4 years now?
Since the middle of 2021. So
Middle
I guess right in the
2021.
middle of that COVID moment where.
All right, but you have visited Alice when you were younger or when you were in Darwin?
No, the first time was during my PhD, and one of my
Right.
supervisors was based here.
Oh,
And
all right.
she invited me to come
To
and
come.
stay to do the work together.
Okay, okay.
And that was the impetus to come to the centre and
Right.
to make that big road trip, like the 1,500 kilometre drive.
Wow. You
down
drove
through.
alone.
Yes.
Wow. 1,500 kilometers from Darwin, and you drive alone to the heart of Australia. So
Wonderful trip.
wonderful trip. I believe that you met lots of amazing people, right? You mentioned just now that there is a collection of ancient knowledge. Could you share a bit about that knowledge in particular? What kind of knowledge? Is it about ecology? Is it about how we build connection with nature, with the planet, or in your case, what is it?
Yes. So I'm really fortunate at the moment, privileged to be teaching at a school where we have 4 Indigenous languages spoken.
4
In fact,
languages.
5.
Right.
Had another join recently.
Yeah.
And those different language groups have existed here in Central Australia for, I guess, many thousands of years.
Yeah.
But what that knowledge is and how that is enacted in everyday life, the cultural capital of the school and the way that culture is engaged with in those language groups, it can be different. Being like every week we have a day where the students and the culture teachers, they go out on country, which is a trip, into the bush where they connect with their different kind of ways of understanding how the environment works, the ways that animals and plants and the ways that basically the ways that the world works from that perspective, and the interrelatedness of those beings, species.
Right.
So there is a definite kind of drawing upon the ancestors and the understanding of ancestral connection. Now, I don't have a lot of access to that knowledge. And that for me is, I think, part of that process of when you get to know people in these contexts, you may or may not be invited into some of that knowing.
Right. Okay, very, very interesting. So in the perspective of yourself as an artist, when you come to Alice, how did you view, the rhythm of the culture or the rhythm of the nature? Because when I look at the pictures of Alice when I was a kid, the pictures of the rocks, the roads, the trees are like the calling to the past. I had that kind of, I don't know, connection with that book that my dad got from the Embassy of Australia. And that picture book can only be found in the National Gallery of Australia. Is that in Canberra? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, I checked the photo book of Darwin and Northern Territory. It's the print book is no longer available, but now it's only found there. Maybe I should go to Canberra someday to go check out. So, in the perspective of an artist, how do you see the landscape of Alice in relation to the cultural landscape of the people? Yeah.
Great question. So after I had come down here a couple of times to be with my supervisor, and then I moved here in 2021, it was to teach art. So teach art with senior students in high school, and a lot of the kids that I was teaching were actually, they come from Indigenous family background,
right.
And so it's a really already there's a kind of like the desert art movement, and the things that have existed here for many decades in terms of Western art and how we conceive of what art is in a Western way.
Yeah.
very interesting that there have been like innovations in technology and in the way that someone like Albert Namatjira, who is one of the foremost, the preeminent artists, Aboriginal artists here, who painted in watercolor. He was introduced to the technology of watercolor and was able to then take that and has become, you know, nationally and internationally renowned because of his work. But then I think also in terms of, so probably during the 60s and 70s when he was coming through and painting like that, then you pick up on the kind of the land rights movement and the activists, the Aboriginal activists that were coming through at the time. And so there became like a merger of some of like the more traditional aspects of knowing and understanding in art practice, and that being transferred onto, you know, the kind of the contemporary mediums that we know, the canvas and, you know, and using acrylic paint. But in order also for a statement to be made around this is what we know and this is who we are, and this is as people what we bring to this land. And Alice Springs has been seen as four corners. So the kind of the meeting of a number of different kind of intersections of Australia right here in the centre, in the heart of the country. So there were things like the Barunga Statement, which was a political presentation to the then Prime Minister at the time, Bob Hawke, about the declarations of what the Aboriginal people wanted to see for their own kind of self-determination, but also in terms of embracing where we are together as a nation. So moving forward together. So there have been some very, you know, incredibly important moments through the Aboriginal art movement here in bringing people together so that we can move forward as a people and as a nation. So that's been a very interesting uncovering of my time here. To learn that and to hear the heartbeat of those elders and what their vision was in order to kind of traverse those different cultures and to kind of not even so much as a melting pot, but to be able to, I mean, the school that I teach at is about two-way learning. So it's about retaining the ancient knowing and culture, but also navigating and being able to, you know, bring the children here into the 21st century in terms of their learning and understanding of what this society, you know, is evolving into as well.
Very interesting. All right. And then did you find some challenges when you are introducing probably a Western-oriented approach to art with the indigenous artists? There probably some differences in how you and the indigenous people artists approaching the art. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, we have at the moment in the art classroom, I co-teach with a Padam artist, and she and I guess just try and hold that space for the children to come in and express what they need to, because there's a lot of kind of inherent knowing and talent in those children right now.
Right.
So in terms of what they bring, and then the traditional artists that we bring in as well to sit with them and to skill them up in the ways of traditional bush medicine painting, for instance.
All right, traditional bush medicine painting. Wow. All right.
And then I can bring in my, I guess, complementary insights into similar Western technique.
Okay.
And the children are often are curious about that, because it's the world outside that they actually haven't experienced yet. So it's an interesting coalescence of things that can go on. And from the term one, we had a theme around water and water holes. So what that was in terms of, traditionally, or how that's been depicted by local artists, it may look like this, and we would show them some of those works.
Right.
And then I would say, look, but on the Western side, we can look at it from this. Okay, now you go off and you can kind of do what's a water hole? You paint something now. So there's there's some interesting, I guess, exploration at the moment about what that can be in this particular art studio space with these.
Okay, So does it mean that art for the indigenous people is basically a collection and management of their knowledge in some ways or in many ways? Because last year, like I talked to someone who is taking care of a mountainous slope area here in Kuningan. This guy is probably the only man in Indonesia who knows about the secret of water and water holes in Java. But this man doesn't do the painting. And I think when I heard your story about those indigenous people, they created art topics on water and water hole. And they also create story, right? So there is painting, there is story. How did you navigate? I mean, the topicalization of the art about nature and then the story.
Yes, that's a really good question. So in terms of the story, the students that come into the studio often we don't see them week after week. So it's a bit more ad hoc than I would like it to be at the moment.
Yeah.
And in terms
Yeah.
of the stories that they're telling,
Yeah.
we probably if we had some of those cultural experts with us, like which we do have from time to time, and they would guide those students around, okay, well, that wasn't quite the right color or whatever, like they would adjust the story with the student. So although I guess I've kind of allowed a bit more of an imaginative space in the art studio, there is definitely a case for a stricter delivery of that knowledge and that expertise. And I think that's where myself as a kind of a Western teacher, I need to kind of step back and allow, because sometimes that's what will happen in language and I won't be aware of what that is. I have actually been pulled up a couple of times by my co-teaching team to say, look, that wasn't that particular work that you showed, which is actually like publicly available down at the local art gallery. They weren't comfortable with me showing that because it was a male dream, like it was a men's dreaming painting. So there are things that I am still very much learning to navigate and understand and to be open about in what is appropriate and how to work in that co-teacher environment where, the traditional knowledge holders absolutely have the floor and the authority to step in.
Right.
Yeah.
And then how do you actually deal with the richness of linguistic diversity of your students? Because um, there are probably 4 or 5 language groups in that school. I mean, how can you arrange the art element of art teaching into that language diversity of the students?
Yeah, great question. And I think that that's another thing that I'm still learning how to do in terms of like we have had the students come in their language groups. So when they come to the art studio, they come as Western Aranda or as Laritja or as Central Aranda, or I'm going to think of the fourth one in a second, but there is Padam as well, which we haven't had yet. But and Walpuri, that's the fourth one. So we are actually calling on more of our community to come in and to be more active in that co-creating space. So we've explored some painting, we've done other kind of media, but we're also now going into some weaving. So weaving isn't traditionally often part of the practice because of some of these groups have been physically located. But in terms of it, in terms of another story and another way of kind of understanding technique and expressing something, through making, we can definitely, be developing that and how that, may actually impact on different language groups. I'd probably need to bring in some more of the cultural experts.
Okay. So in your bio, you mentioned that you are an interdisciplinary artist. Do you think that your role helped you a lot in transform your probably current understanding about art or indigenous art, because there is a tendency that an artist or a teacher or a researcher can only approach something monolithically, right? So what does it mean for you to have this interdisciplinary view of art?
Yeah, I think in terms of how I can facilitate what goes on for the students,
Yep.
I think it's just being able to respond to them in different ways. I think our students come from quite challenging, a lot of them come from challenging backgrounds.
Yeah.
So it, in a lot of ways, is more of a therapeutic kind of stance in terms of okay, what do they need right now? And often it is paint, like there's something very healing and therapeutic for them to be using paint and expressing themselves in that type of medium or material.
Yep.
So in terms of like the interdisciplinary work, I can think about it, I can step back and think about it with a bit more of a meta picture and go, okay, we are starting to produce now a body of work each term, and what that will kind of cumulatively become is, I suppose, where we can make those stories, stories can be created between a piece like a waterhole painting and then the bush tucker medicine that's been done in acrylics, for instance, or in Posca pens, and then the weaving, and then what those stories can then be set up to talk, like to chatter to each other about in an exhibition space. So the interdisciplinary work, and even, I think something that is I'm yet to explore with them would be a performative understanding, like of their bodies and how their own kind of response is to the work that would be set up as well. So that would be another stage to that. So I'm trying to take what's in the art room at the moment out into, we have I guess a transdisciplinary, it's almost like a health clinic / traditional practice space in the school. So if that will become transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary at that point, if we've got people from the community that are interested to come in and sit and weave, for instance, with their family, and there are things that can be unpacked with, Western counsellors and traditional Nankara or Nankari, which is our kind of local healers, and it becomes that transdisciplinary space. So I see that art isn't just kind of contained to, a dot on a page, but is actually a point of connection and a point of healing or a point of transformation at that point. So that's where I would see my interdisciplinary work coming in, where I can think a bit more outside the square, just a canvas frame.
All right. So does it also mean that doing art is also part of the development of well-being of the indigenous people? Do you think so?
I think so. And I think it's naturally part of more of that holistic pedagogy that I work with some amazing Indigenous educators at the school, and they are working on, I guess, the refinement of what a holistic pedagogy, or the way that we at the school deliver learning and well-being. And that's the kind of the confluence of the Western and the traditional, like the two that kind of work together to produce, these, to help these amazing students connect with their own sense of being, their own rich legacy and histories with what the contemporary kind of requirements are for that, what they're going to step into as adults.
Oh, very interesting. Now we will ask Emma Dewi and Rivaldo to join the conversation too. Emma Dewi or Rivaldo? Yes, please join the conversation with Emma.
Okay, speaking of art in indigenous area, I'm curious about the European settlement at 1800, I think so, and how the European settlement is influenced the art of indigenous people, and also vice versa. I think, and I'm more curious about the current situation of the art that influenced by European settlement itself.
So the first part, I caught that you. What was the influence on European settlement? So on Aboriginal art, and that is, I think, in the ways that we have the technology of Western art through, the ways that we put pigment into pots and use binders and then carry that to other places. And whereas, there's there's amazing sites not far out of Alice Springs where there are ochre pits. So the body painting and that kind of the distribution of meaning and connection to ceremony and the way that colour and pigment was used to express and to connect. Again, I can't speak to that in any great depth. But I am also thinking back to, like, in the way that those technologies and in the way that we take on a mask or we take on body paint and we become a kind of an other, and thinking about the beautiful, the mask, the Dari Topeng, and how, I was so fascinated with the technique and the approach, the underpinning philosophies of, was it natural, like the kind of the naturalist, or was it the spiritualist that was kind of at work to inform the engagement with that particular structure of the dance? But in the way that the biting of the mask behind the mask to hold it to the face, the biting and the breathing at the same time, and that kind of the embodied, how that would feel. And it's a different experience of something going on there.
Right.
And I think, I don't know, like it's really gone very deep in me, the time that I spent in Chirabon and with those dancers. But I think it would be very interesting to bring those dancers to Central Australia to speak with some of the...
We'll think about it, Emma. Yeah, we will think about it. Very interesting. Yes, Emma Dewi.
All right, thank you. It's very interesting to hear experience for researching indigenous culture people. But I'm curious, how about your experience when you come to Cirebon? Because maybe my friends here in Cirebon is also curious about it, right? So is there anything you can like adapt to your teaching or research that is reflected from Cirebon culture?
Very interesting.
Oh, it was such a beautiful time. I loved meeting the people in Cirebon. Everybody was so warm and so welcoming. And I think when you, I've never been to a country like yours before, so I may have been visiting like big capital cities like Manila or Singapore, but when you go into the regional, like a regional place like Cirebon, and it's an immersion, it's a proper immersion, and it's a real, it revolutionized how I felt about travel and how I wanted to, like, for instance, my understanding of Lala and your family, Lala, and meeting your family, like those deep connections. You take that back to Darwin or Australia and just hope that other people might be able to experience a similar, I mean, Lala, your understanding of history, and, when you took me to the palace, and there were just so many kind of layers of, and I think at one point maybe you described it as a melting pot, as Cirebon as a melting pot. But it was, to me, I was looking at some of the palace walls, and you can see those beautiful, like the peeling back of all the different kind of paints and the patina of like the different civilizations and the different waves of, I guess, experience of travelers and people that have come to your amazing nation. It's just, I guess, remaining open about what all of that history and past and how that informs who our closest, largest neighbour is as well. Like in terms of Australia and Indonesia, we hear certain things from our governments, but I just wish that, people would just understand people more.
Right, right, very interesting. For your information, Emma, the new Kertajati International Airport in Majalengka, which is only 40 minutes away from our campus, will be in full operation at the end of October. So it will be easier for us to go to Denpasar and to Darwin, and it will be easier for you to come here to Cirebon. So because we have limited time this morning, right, Emma? Do you think that we can imagine future collaborative, maybe cultural exchange, student exchange in the future with your school?
I think that would be a wonderful thing to explore.
All right.
And I'm almost certain that our principal and board would be very open to that kind of exploration.
Right.
They're very warm people and invite a lot of exchange and a lot of dialogue, and would be absolutely thrilled to be able to. Yeah.
Is it possible for us to invite Dr. Morris, right, too, into the podcast, because we would like to know more about Alice Springs, the schools, and all the people? That will be wonderful, Emma. And one last thing, Emma, it's 9:27. I mean, maybe we can finish the story this morning in the next 5 minutes. What is the best thing that you could share with the people in Cirebon about your previous experience in Cirebon, and how it will inform or probably inspire people of Australia to come to Cirebon, because it's regional place, but we were actually the melting pot of the past and so on. Yes, Emma, please.
Oh, I think, look, I had such a wonderful experience. As hospitality was incredible. People were very warm. The university was incredibly welcoming. So it was wonderful to meet people that had and even I was trying to speak a bit of Bahasa, but I was actually incredibly touched that a lot of people were also able to speak English, and there was even just like I just remember being at the hotel and having great conversations even with the staff there. So I think tourism and hospitality and what you have in terms of such a rich history and it being probably quite unknown in a lot of ways, because Australians, I suppose, default to Jakarta or Bali or somewhere, but you have such an amazing, I guess, moment, particularly with the airport now.
Right.
About what that could be, and even I think maybe these cultural exchanges that could perhaps start that off, where we're just connecting on these real heart kind of felt ways. And but like just the kind of the insights into I love dance, so the cultural kind of underpinnings and the cultural richness of Cirebon. And then to kind of walk, we went to the mall a few times and it's got Starbucks and this and that the other. I was like, it could be anywhere. So I think it has it all. It just it's a wonderful place to visit, and to maintain this kind of connection with is really very special. So I think
you've been very insightful, Emma, since I contacted you 2 weeks ago, right? I think Emma, Dewi, and Revaldo will also join the project. We need to create a global connection, probably with Australia. And I know many people want to go to Sydney, right, to see the Opera House and Darling Harbour. But I'm going to tell them that Australia is very rich in history too. And then the very first place that we can start visiting is Alice Springs, and then probably Uluru, Emma. So Emma, thank you very much for joining our podcast. We hope to invite you again probably someday, Emma, because you are the expert of dance, right? You have insightful talk about dance, about Tari Topeng Cirebon. I guess we can also set up a dance workshop here in Cirebon when you come back to Cirebon someday with your team from Alice Spring. And I think we can do so many things. We are also promoting international mobility program for the students across Indonesia. And we have a big amount of money for the scholarship for anyone who are wishing to do their masters or PhDs. I think the government has sufficient budget to finance the Indonesian students to go to Australia. So I think yes, we have to create those golden moments together. I think at the end of the year we'll probably have the plan to come to Darwin and Alice Springs, and then we hope to see you back in Cirebon.
That's beautiful.
So Emma,
the global perspectives is so important, I think. Lale, really,
yes.
Great.
I think we can write stories together. We can write research together once we have done with the cultural exchange project. So Emma, thank you very much again for coming to our podcast. I hope you are well, and then wishing you best in life, Emma. Thank you, everyone.